Computer. Great. Welcome everyone to day 5 of LibreFest 2024. This is going to be a shortened day compared to the last 4 days that we've had in this week's presentations or set of presentations. Uh, and we're very excited to have actually 3 external presenters talking about different aspects associated with the LibreVerse. After I do a little bit of a conversation around the extended aspects of the LibreVerse beyond adapt and beyond the editing. I talked about a handful of those things at the start when I introduced the LibreVerse. I just want to make sure that we reiterate what we can have or what you have access to. From that, maybe address any questions that you guys have. And then we'll transition into 3 very interesting presentations, and I'll introduce them as we go. So with that, does anyone have any immediate questions that they want to address, or can I just jump straight into this? I don't see anyone chiming in, so we can get this thing going. Okay. So, like I mentioned, and like you've had experience with this week, the LibreVerse is a multifaceted, multi-technology infrastructure for you to capitalize on and move forward. It relies on a variety of different technologies, where each technology is meant to focus on a specific task. We take feature creep seriously in the sense that we like a technology to focus on a specific task, and we don't like to vary that task greatly. If something requires massive expansion, instead of trying to push the technology beyond its comfort zone, grab a technology or build a technology that's able to address that. And that results in a multifaceted, admittedly complex infrastructure, but hopefully you've would agree with me now that it's also an exceedingly powerful infrastructure in order to advance the goals that we have and the goals that you have in terms of using OER. So back to the launch pad, right? The map of the LibreVerse. And again, the way it's structured, we have our 16 independent libraries here. Your account coming in here gives you default capabilities of making books in the workbenches of 13 of these 16 libraries. And in some cases, some of you have access to the other 3. The other 3 are the ones that are focusing on dedicating or distributing OER broadly in other languages. So the Espanol library, the Ukrainsky library, and the global library, which is right up here, are the ones that focus on that. But that's not typically the focus of conversations that we have in these sort of meetings. So feel free if you want to write or get access to making books in other libraries to do so, because your account gives you the ability in order to do so. Now, above those 16 independent wikis, we have these 7 applications. We have the Adapt homework system that we discussed quite extensively in day 1 and day 2. We have the Commons and Conductor that we went over in Monday. You've been accessing the conductor page for this conference routinely, I expect and hope. And building the conductor page is the first step in terms of building any book. You can't build a book without building your conductor page, so you're automatically get exposed to that. The Commons is the cataloging system on the front end. You can build catalogs. This right here is essential cataloging infrastructure for the LibreText, but we have customized catalogs that are branded for individual campuses that have joined our LibreNet, which is our consortium for sustainability, which is a paltry amount of money in order to join. Right now, it's $1,500 per year, compared to alternatives that are oftentimes 5 to 8 to 10 times more with significantly less power. That's because we care about mission over money. And I love talking about that, and I can discuss that in more detail later on this afternoon. So this is an example of a campus commons for the Coalinga College. They joined our LibreNet last week, and this is going to be the conversation that, or at least the topic, and the extended topic of using LibreText within this college that Rachel Fleming is going to be discussing in approximately 20 minutes. So I'll leave it at that, other than saying that it's a branded interface. So it provides the opportunity for stakeholders, whether those stakeholders are faculty, whether they are students, or whether they're administrators or outside interests, in order to get access to what resources are used in that campus, being able to identify them, and then hopefully be able to use them constructively. That means adoption. That means cloning and curation via the skills that we already discussed before. Um, I will also emphasize this, and I may have discussed it, and you may have seen it, but it's really important in order to point out in terms of the Commons and Conductor, is that the Commons and Conductor is not just a cataloging and project management tool system. It's an infrastructure in order to facilitate asset uh, distribution. So any project that we have, any conductor project, yes, we have some threads for communication, which is exceedingly important for teams. We also have a section for assets that we can upload. Those assets for uploads can be meant only for team members, that is, members that are obviously added to the team, but you have the ability in order to make it public so anyone's able to find it. And that means that you're also able to do searches for finding it, and that if you add it to your book, for example, we'll take a look at this Fundamentals of Biology Lab, and it has assets that are the slide deck associated with this book. So it provides a mechanism of showing to potential adopters or users, these are the ancillary materials connected to this resource. Now, you can make entries in the conduct into in that are make assets that are added to a conductor page, not just project team or visible, but you also have the ability in order to make it visible to only verified instructors. And so now you can see why we verify instructors, because you may have a resource that you only want instructors to have access to. Question banks. If you have PowerPoint, not PowerPoint, but oftentimes files of question banks that you want to distribute outside of Adapt, which is where I prefer to keep them, but I understand that people want to keep it as individual files. You can set it up so only verified instructors have access, and then you rely on us in order to ensure that when we create accounts that people are instructors before we actually have them verified. So in other words, you don't need to be constantly harassed. Maybe you're not viewing it as a harassment, but constantly prompted in order to provide access to various things that's out there. And then we'll get you information about downloads and distribution information that you can use for respective reports or other needs that you have for that without actually causing any pain on your guys' side. So I encourage you to capitalize on that if you have resources, if you have ancillary materials that you want to distribute to complement what you're creating as a textbook or your homework system that's out there. So there are a couple questions in the chat. I just want to mention, Martin asked, once we create a textbook in a conductor, I can place it in your college or department's commons site. If you're, yes, because you are in Chabot, Chabot is a member of the LibreNet consortium, so you have your own campus commons for Chabot. It will show up automatically once we actually move it out of the workbench, or within 24 hours after a resyncing cycle is processed. But that, again, only campuses that are member of the consortium get their own branded campus commons. Otherwise, they can store their books in their bookshelves, because again, we freely provide up to 5 books for free. I know that for free because we care about mission, not money. So you can then do searches over assets, just like you can do searches over books. You can do searches over projects, and you could even do searches over authors. This is not fully activated here, but it will be soon, and we'll make it so that you have the ability in order to click on the author, identify this author, and say these are the projects that author is part of, and these are the assets that that author is connected to, subject to whether the viewer has permission to see that information, and provide I want to call it a social media-like approach, but it does provide a mechanism in order to showcase individual contributions. And eventually this conductor is meant in order to host communities of practice. We've already been doing this for a few communities, testing it out, and it's meant in order to facilitate discussions, conversations, and such around best practices and usage of open materials across multiple campuses, across multiple states. in even multiple countries, such that people can identify what people are doing and learn from what everyone is doing. The key point about why I think this is going to be far more successful than other projects is it's the community of practice is centered around the actual resource itself, which is being used, instead of having somewhere, some other forum, somewhere that you're trying to push people to use, which is oftentimes the rate determining step in terms of evaluating whether that community actually thrives or not. And the vast majority of these communities actually fail. So anyways, that is what the Commons and Conductor is set up for doing. There are lots of other aspects that I went over briefly. Josh went over in more detail yesterday. I encourage you in order to take a look at and such. So before I transition, I want to talk about this warning that you no doubt have noticed when you actually looked at any of the conductors systems. So we have lots of technologies. We have lots of servers, and most of them are running in the cloud. So the way I would describe that to neophytes, to what the cloud means, it means is running on other people's computers. In this case here is running either on Amazon, Amazon Web Services, or AWS for short, or is running on DigitalOcean, which is an alternative hosting platform for some of our technologies. The problem with other people's servers is that you are reliant on their capabilities of maintaining the infrastructure, which includes the hardware, includes the software, includes how the software interacts with the rest of the internet, and many other aspects that are not overly important for this conversation. The key aspect is that people who run a platform at the top have a series of potentials for things breaking all the way back to the bottom that you have oftentimes limited access. And this applies to essentially every single platform that you'll see in EdTech today. So Pressbooks has the same thing. They're hosted by Amazon. OER Commons, I think, is also hosted on Amazon, and many other places off of there. What happened last night was Amazon, which is, again, one of these steps that we have here, goes to a vendor that did what's called SSL. And it's basically security for websites. It's what's responsible for converting HTTP in the URL to HTTPS. And most people push that you need to have the S in order to be used effectively. And that certificate wasn't automatically updated as it was supposed to be by the vendor. It affected multiple people, and everybody was screaming at everybody else in terms of trying to get this thing in place, from my team and from other teams. And for about 4 to 5 hours, it was difficult in order to access the library. Many of you may have tried to access the library. You needed to agree or approve to access the library in an insecure manner. And I can understand that a request might be kind of weird, and you may not have a desire for doing so. Now, how many times has this happened in the past? 0. How many times will this happen in the future? Probably 0 off of that. But it does indicate the issue when you have a series of steps and chains here. Things happen. So while we are 99.5 or 99.7% up, we have a small sliver of issues that come up, and we take it seriously in order to update it, as does Amazon. So that's why this warning is on here. We should probably take down the warning because we made a solution in order to circumvent it, and it's probably fixed right now. So anyone have any questions or concerns regarding that aspect? I was trying to emphasize that this is endemic to how organizations work in the cloud. And it's akin to if everything was on-prem or on-premises, if I had control of every computer, if the hardware crashed, and then I'd have to go through the updates and things like that. So that's why nothing is 100% up, ever. So as many of you may have recognized when Facebook goes down or Google goes down, but those obviously has a much greater impact than when LibreText goes down. Okay, so back to the point at hand, which is the greater aspect of the LibreVerse. Jupyter Hub I discussed yesterday as an infrastructure in order to facilitate coding, data analysis, and visualizations. So if you're a STEM instructor, or you're teaching a STEM class, which is probably synonymous, uh, you may want to be able to have students code up problems, analyze things, and you historically would provide individuals with, here is a program that you paid for compiling, uh, and then from compiling your software or paying for MATLAB or something like that, you're able to manipulate the data and work with it. Things have progressed enough that this infrastructure that came on the market, I use the term market loosely here, about 7 to 8 years ago, called Jupyter, introduced the way in order to make it so a single platform can actually run the programs individually, and you just basically then access it through the internet. And that makes life a lot easier because you then have this massive infrastructure and power in the central server, but you can access it on any weak computer out there. Weak mean a laptop, weak could be a desktop, a tab. A week can be a phone. You can even access it on your smartwatch in order to be able to do your calculations. That would probably be a little painful, but it's still possible in order to do. Uh, so for those of you that have an interest in order to tap into the Jupyter Hub that we have, please contact us directly. We can give you some details associated with that. It's not fully connected to the single sign-on account, but it will be soon. And it's critical, as far as my opinion, in terms of instruction in physical sciences these days. Nova is the cataloging system that we have for our books. It has two purposes. The first purpose is to provide a mechanism to host our books outside of the wikis. And this is a open source technology that you can grab and you can run on your own server if you decide that you want to do so. So you can build your own books on this infrastructure. So you can think of it as like Pressbooks without all the power of the LibreVerse that you're able to put in. Actually, Pressbooks doesn't have the power of the LibreVerse, but you can think of it as the library of in LibreVerse outside of the power of it, something akin to Pressbooks. And then you have the ability in order to host the books, edit the books, and then eventually upload those books back to the mothership where the LibreVerse is the mothership. It facilitates a federated infrastructure, and it is a fragmented infrastructure, which I have railed against several times this week, but it's a federated infrastructure to facilitate a collective sharing of the content because it's standardized and it's able to process content in a similar manner. We haven't formally released it for that purpose. Second aspect that what the Nova is meant in order to do is to act as a equivalent of a course commons or campus commons, Canvas commons. Sorry, commons is a very common name, where you can compile a collection, aka a book, that will grab pages from the books that you created on a library, pages from Adapt, and build it all together just like it would be a LMS course. Just like it would be on a Canvas Commons. So why do we not use Canvas Commons off of there? And there is a really beautiful slide in order to emphasize this that I wanted to be able to bring up. And I think I may have introduced this slide on uh, on Monday, which is this slide right here. And this emphasizes the fact that LMSs come and LMSs go. And you can see when they develop and then when they start to get smaller and smaller as other things happening. Canvas has done a great job of growing. It's still growing. You'll see that Moodle has grown, is now starting to tail off. And you also know that this is almost always monotonic after it gets the peak. In other words, you don't get resurgences connected to this. And you'll see that Brightspace as a non-open site has about 50% of the market at Canvas. So the key point is that LMSs come, LMSs go, and more importantly, because my constituency is not meant to only campuses that have adopted Canvas, I want everybody to be able to use OER. I want everyone to be able to benefit from OER, and in making things coupled to Canvas as a walled garden completely is the opposite of what the goal is that we have here. So this is so Nova is a manifestation of our agnostic perspective on the way we pursue things in order to host this stuff. Lastly, Nova is going to be used for our professional development series for asynchronous courses. So this infrastructure is a little mini LMS. Now, I don't want to get in the world of LMS, even though it does look like that we are getting in there, because it's, as I showed in the slide that was up here a moment ago, there are lots of players in there. It's lots of big business and lots of complexities in order to be able to do it that I don't want to address because I care more about OER and its implementation in the classroom than about technology for course development. It's just our preference. That being said, there are many campuses in the world that can't afford the cost of access to Canvas or the software as a service version of Moodle or the for commercial access to D2L or other things. This right here provides the opportunity for them to actually have what I refer to as an LMS Lite. It's able to keep the same functionality or similar functionality in terms of manage students, organizing them, giving them access to homework, giving them access to textbooks, have ancillary materials, all the core component without all the icing of embedding various tools and all that aspect that I just don't want to deal with. Now, this is obviously important for countries that are developing that don't have the financial resources for buying into LMSs, but there's actually a sizable number of K-12 campuses in America that don't have the financial resources in order to buy into an LMS. So they use things that are not very good in order to address that, like Google Classroom. Google Classroom is not an LMS. It's just an interface to Google Tools. To Google Office Suite that's out there, which is nice and powerful, and obviously comes with issues associated with the fact of having Google tracking you and going through all those issues, which probably shouldn't be in academia, but that's a different topic of conversation. This could be an alternative, and we hope that this would be an alternative for those cases. And we've had conversations with various districts in terms of expanding this once we actually have it released, and also conversations in Korea for massive expansion of these things for their districts. So that is our intent for Nova. We're excited with what Nova is able to produce. It's just taking a little bit of time for us to be able to get through the works and make it operate in the way that we want it to operate. The last thing that I want to talk about, and I already emphasized the support center that you can use in order to submit tickets, and you can go through the insight system for identifying issues that you may want to check up and ask before submitting a ticket, is the Studio. So Studio is the repository / building infrastructure for H5P. If you may remember from the discussion we had on Monday in ADAPT, there are 4 technologies in ADAPT. iMathAS, WebWork, native technology, like that's used in learning management systems called QTI, and the 4th one was H5P. H5P originated from a company that was north of the Arctic Circle in Norway called Jubel. And it is meant as an infrastructure in order to facilitate construction of individual packets or individual tight assessments and interactives that you can easily move around in different places from different platforms, which is great. And you can then embed into books or embed into other sources that have a need in order to have this engagement aspect. Again, following the theme that I've tried to emphasize numerous times, the greater the engagement, typically the greater the learning, and we all want to have greater learning in our classroom. So it's great. This infrastructure has grown like hotcakes. Not sure if that's technically a term, but whatever. It's grown massively. And the reason it's grown massively is it's easy in order to construct these problems, these interactives. Your account for signing into the Libre one gives you access to creating these interactives in Studio. And I encourage you to take a look and see the Studio interactives, because this is quite popular out there. Our belief is that just like we don't like fragmentation of content in different sites, because we think that that's actually detrimental in moving OER forward, we also believe that we don't want these interactives to be located in different little pages and books in different spots everywhere, which is what H5P is able to do. So we want to bring it together into a single spot so you can do searches, find meta tags, and do all the stuff that you want to do in order to find it, so you don't have to replicate the wheel. And that is what the Studio is designed for doing. I don't have time in order to go into making these problems unless you want to address it in the reflection period during today's or at the end of today's conversation. But I will mention one thing associated with H5P. And this is so new because it was announced 36 hours ago. So Jubal, the company that actually made H5P, was just bought out by Desire to Learn, D2L, which is a for-profit public institution designed in order that has a fiduciary responsibility to maximize profit in the education landscape. And it may be clear to you my opinion regarding this by the way that I actually formulated that description for them. I believe that OER should be implemented and pursued by not-for-profit organizations, where mission is the goal and money is not the goal. And as you look around the OER landscape, you'll see many companies that are for profit, but they oftentimes don't emphasize why they're for profit. And the key signature of that is they ask for an ungodly amount of money in order to do the sort of things that we provide to you for free or at a modest fund for our sustainability. So I don't know where the future is for H5P. Some people are enthusiastic about this purchase. Some people are watching, and some people are like me with the devil's advocate that just believes that it's intrinsically going to be bad, because every single time I've seen a for-profit company purchase a good company with good impact that's open or something like that is for a reason, and that reason is to make money, and that money comes from the people who we don't want to give money, the students and the faculty and the campuses off there. So if you have any issues or concerns about that, please let me know. Still don't know where it's going to be going. I don't know when things are going to be happening. I don't know what its effect is going to be on this, other than I'll mention that H5P is written under a specific open source license that's called MIT license. This is not this qualitatively is similar to the Creative Commons license that we talked about before, but it's meant for source, not for content. And it has other aspects associated. The one thing that's important here is that MIT licenses are irrevocable. So that means that what we've created can't be uncreated. However, it does mean that it can be detached from future development if they decide that they want to go about doing that. I'm always concerned about relying on a for-profit company for the way that we do things. Fortunately, you have other aspects in Adapt in order to be able to move it forward and such. So I'm not trying to scare you associated with these things. I just wanted to provide you a little bit of context of something that just happened a handful of hours ago. So feel free to take a look at these things. You can do a lot of cool things connected to this. Of course, you have lots of accessibility issues with those cool things. And that's that. Okay, so Martin asked the question, what sort of skills does one need to create something in H5P? It actually turns out that the same skill that you'd be using for creating questions in Canvas is very similar to the skills that you'd be using for creating questions in H5P. It's that easy for doing so. And fortunately, you have a master H5P person at your college, which is Christina. I think I saw Christina in here. And she tends to run these workshops for OERI on how to use Adapt and how to use things moves forward. If I understand things right, Chabot is still paying $10,000 a year for access to H5P when you have access to it for free via our site, but how you spend your money is your business. So, Like I said, I encourage you to dig into it. There are lots of tutorials available in order to move forward. Some are on our YouTube site, some are on other people's YouTube sites and such. So with that, I'm going to end this sort of overview or general overview of the LibreVerse. I wanted to make sure that I emphasize these